It is no secret that car enthusiasts like you and I prefer to row our own gears, at least the vast majority of us. It's a bit unfortunate then that the manual transmission is slowly dying, although with cars like the Z and the Supra, it is making a return. That being said, those that are lucky enough to be in the market for a supercar don't have very many manual choices, but there are a few outliers that are continuing to produce manual transmissions in the extreme performance category. My name is Braden Carlson, you're watching a MotorBiscuit video, and today we're going to discuss all the exotic car manufacturers' final manual models and the few outliers that are still producing them to this day. We're going to go ahead and start with the exotic car manufacturer to end all exotic car manufacturers, Lamborghini. The last Lamborghini made with a manual transmission was the Gallardo, and yes, it is pronounced Gallardo. I'm sure most of you are familiar with that fact, but for the few that are still indoctrinated from folks like Akon and Bam Margera, please stop saying Gallardo. You might be surprised to know though that the manual Gallardo was still available all the way up into 2014 model years, but since then, Lamborghini has not produced a manual transmission car. In a similar vein, if you want to make the argument that real Lamborghinis have V12s, and the last manual Lamborghini was the Murcielago, and that pronunciation is still up for debate. I only say that because of Ed Bolian. Murcielago. Interesting. If you think of a supercar manufacturer and the first thing you think of isn't Lamborghini, then it's probably Ferrari, and Ferrari's last manual transmission car came in the form of the Ferrari California in 2012. Again, a little bit more recent than you probably would think, but that's because most of the time when you think of manual supercars, you think of that early 2000s era, so you might assume that the 360 was the last manual car, but it wasn't. Although, having grown up in that era, my personal preference for a stick shift Ferrari would be the 356 because it has pop-up headlights and it's a V12. And honestly, how could it possibly get cooler than that? Of course, if the pop-up headlights aren't your thing, the 599 was briefly available with a manual transmission, but it did die off around the same time as the Ferrari California in 2012. Now, let's talk about McLaren. I know what you're thinking, McLaren hasn't really made any manual supercars, and that's kind of true because the one and only manual car that they made might be considered more along the lines of a hypercar than a supercar, the McLaren F1. One of the most timeless and iconic supercars of our era, still today the fastest naturally aspirated production car ever made, was only available with a manual transmission. The 6-speed only option is of course a product of a bygone era, but the McLaren F1 still had its weirdness in that situation with the driver sitting right in the middle of the car and the two passenger seats recessed all the way back, and probably, actually now that I think about it, the only mid-engine supercar that ever was made to seat 3 people. I don't know about that for sure. If you know better than I do, let me know in the comments. At any rate, don't plan on McLaren making a sort of manual comeback anytime soon, and if you want an F1, you better have north of $10 million to spend on a car. Or you could just ask Jay Leno for a ride very nicely. Rumor has it sometimes he will give you a ride. Don't tell him I said that though if you see him. Don't put this on MotorBiscuit, okay? It's just, I heard him say it in a Jay Leno's Garage video. I'm sure he kind of created his own problems in that front with everybody who heard that and sees him at a car show now asking for a ride in the McLaren F1. But I don't want to sacrifice my chances, so please don't spread the word. Jay Leno, if you're watching this, can I ride in your McLaren F1? Now, in a similar one-of-one sort of vein, Audi, the R8, was its only manual supercar because it's the company's only supercar. Now, the Audi R8 is of course going away after this model year, but it hasn't been available with a manual transmission for the past couple of years. However, through a long majority of its initial run, it was available with a 6-speed gated manual transmission with either a V8 or the ever elusive V10. If you happen to own a V10 manual Audi R8, can I borrow that to make a video, please? Now, let's talk about exotic car manufacturers that are still manufacturing cars with manual transmissions. The first one that should come to mind is Porsche, because the 911 has been available with a manual transmission for a long time, and even the GT3 to this day is still available with a manual transmission, while the GT3 RS isn't. Virtually every other 911 is. Oh, except for the turbo. Right. Listen, I should know better, I know. Aston Martin is still doing what it can. The Aston Martin Valor is a limited to 110 production vehicle, but it has a twin turbocharged V12 with a manual transmission offering. But unfortunately, as far as a mass production Aston Martin goes, 2021 was the final year you could get the final standard issue Aston Martin Vantage with a manual transmission. I cry every time, and so should you. Oddly enough, a performance hyper or supercar with a manual transmission has almost come full circle as a boutique sort of option. For example, the Pagani Utopia is an 864 horsepower V12 mid-engine hypercar, and it is available with a manual transmission. Another great example is the Koenigsegg CC850. Koenigsegg recently put it out as a commemorative anniversary of Christian von Koenigsegg himself being alive, and the 20th anniversary since the release of the CC8S. Although calling this one a manual transmission is a little bit weird because it's both an automatic and a manual. It has a clutch pedal, so you can drive it like a regular manual transmission, but it also is automatic, so you don't need to. It's a crazy feat of engineering, but it is super cool, and frankly, I'm just happy to see the manual transmission kept alive. Now, outside of the supercar realm, of course, there are plenty of cars still sporting the manual transmission, like I mentioned earlier, the Supra, Nissan Z, the Toyota GR Corolla, and my favorite, the Cadillac CT5V Blackwing. But there are plenty of cars that don't have a manual transmission, much like the C8 Corvette that a lot of people claim they would buy if it was available with a manual, but the sales figures of the C7 Corvette say otherwise, and I wrote an article about that, so if you want more info, check out the link in the description. Ultimately, we're not ready to see the manual transmission die yet, and it seems like a vast majority of automotive enthusiasts aren't either, but they are finally taking that thought process to the dealership networks, buying manual Zs, buying manual Supras. Of course, the GR Corolla is only available with a manual transmission, and those are selling quite well, so if we keep this up, guys, this is all on us, the consumer. We can keep the manual transmission alive. In the comments, tell me your favorite currently available manual transmission car, or comment a car that you wish was currently available with a manual transmission. In the meantime, I'm gonna head out of here. My name is Braden Carlson. You just watched a MotorBiscuit video. Make sure to follow us on Instagram at MotorBiscuit Official and on X at Biscuit Motor. For all sorts of automotive news, stories, and exciting things going on, check us out at MotorBiscuit.com. Press the subscribe button, and I will see you next time.